live! Yay!
Yay!
I'm Erin.
I'm Chris. Hello, everybody.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about Patch Manager.
And more.
And more.
Oh my gosh.
Well, really, you know, it's about the best practices.
Yeah, best practices, and we're going to sprinkle in a bunch of fun stuff. We're gonna hit a bunch of stuff today.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fascinating. I'm intrigued and enthralled.
You're stoked, aren't you?
I'm totally stoked.
We
It's
hope
patch
you're
management.
stoked.
I love talking about patch management.
Yeah, we hope you're stoked too. Let's get started. We have a lot to cover.
Oh, let's jump in.
So first, what I would be doing a big injustice if I didn't set up the webinar, right? So let's talk about today's security landscape. It's getting more prevalent, right? The need for staying up to date on your patches, patching your devices, having antivirus, malware, additional measures, multi-layer protection strategy. That's a big must these days. So that's why we understand the importance of this webinar, the importance of a main pillar in Automate, which is the patch management piece. So that's why we're bringing you in today to help you better understand how patch management works within Automate. We did make some massive changes to our patch manager within 11, and we've been adding enhancements all along. Yeah, so you can tell just by the statistic right here, $301 million was paid out last year in ransomware payments alone. So again, the threats are not getting, they're not going away, and you need to stay on top of this.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of examples from the WannaCry to even Equifax, all kind of boil down to virus protection. And even Equifax was they didn't patch a specific software. One person forgot to patch a software, and then you see all the trouble that caused. So
exactly.
We want to kind of talk about just the best practices overall, what it's going to do for you. We're going to sprinkle in some third-party patching in there and kind of hit the whole gambit today.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
So first, before we get into that, before, let's talk about updating your Automate server. Okay, so we may have new people in our audience, relatively new Automate partners. So I just briefly wanted to touch on this a little bit. If you aren't aware, ConnectWise Automate updates their server. We update our software every month through a patch. So it's very easy to update your server through a simple patch process. So what are we updating? Each month we're looking at known issues and fixing those, partner reported issues, so trending items that pop up in support, enhancements. We're always listening to partner feedback. So you guys out there, whenever you submit enhancement requests, or send them on over. So we're incorporating that stuff into our monthly patch. And we'll be able to see those enhancements live in Patch Manager today. We're going to cover those. So where do you find those monthly updates for your Automate server? You're going to go out to the partner portal. So currently, our partner portal lives at support.labtechsoftware.com. You want to show them? So that's what our partner portal looks like today. Underneath resources, products and updates link. That is where you're going to find your monthly patch. Now your monthly patch is, it incurs the most recent, meaning they're all compiled onto one another. So if you missed last month's patch and you just want to, install this month's, just simply do that. It's going to have all the items included from last month in this month's patch.
You don't have to go in specific order. It's like, oh, I have 14. I have to wait and go 15, 16. Just jump right in there and get the latest patch and see what's going on with that.
Exactly. That partner portal will always furnish you with the latest patch. And just know that even if you've missed it in a couple of months, you're going to have all those fixes because they just compile right onto one another. So good news though.
Oh my God, what's happening?
We're moving the partner portal into University. I know, it's so exciting. So this is what it's going to look like once we get it into University. I'm hoping that's going to drop sometime mid-November, maybe early December when we get the Automate Partner Portal over into University. You'll be able to find your products and updates under Support Automate Resources. We will be running both sites concurrently for a little while, so that you're able to have some time to transition to that. We understand that not everybody's listening to this webinar, but we'll keep preaching that. And as you receive those products and updates, monthly patch emails, we'll direct you to the right place to go. Yeah, good stuff. All right, so now that we've done all our due diligence, I may have forgotten some housekeeping items. We will be taking your questions at the end. So save all those questions. We'll promise to cover as much as we can at the end. Also, if you're having problems hearing us, simply log out of the room and rejoin. That oftentimes fixes any audio issues you may experience.
All right,
so let's talk about Windows Patch.
Why don't we? So we're primarily talking about Windows Patch Management. We're also going to sprinkle some third-party patching in there and show you what that entails. But when we're talking about Windows Patch Management, well, why are we doing this? Well, we get to choose what we want and when we do it. And with this new system, we have the ability to test before we deploy it automatically. If you're still using the old Ignite-based system, you haven't even upgraded the new Patch Manager, we now have the ability to automate that process where I set aside specific devices that I want to test first, and then it automatically copies that over to one or two more groups to kind of see how it's going before I release it to general population. And we also have the ability to audit and report, going through and doing everything within the new Patch Manager. So I'm not jumping out in the navigation tree and trying to track down all these bits and pieces. Everything is going to live and breathe within the new Patch Manager. So it's one interface that pretty much controls everything. Now, when I say controls everything, we still go by the Windows Update API. So we're just communicating with those devices locally in their API, and we're just pretty much have to be able to communicate to that device, and they have to be able to communicate to the Windows Update site.
That's correct.
Because they have to pull all the patch information so we can get it from them and then put it in our database. And then once we have it in our database, that's what you see is populated within the Patch Manager interface. So we have to have communication. All the devices that you're managing, we got to make sure that they can get to the Windows Update site. We're primarily only going to send 2 patches. With all the bells and whistles that come with Patch Manager, it's simply we send 2 commands. We say, hey, give me your inventory so I can see what's missing, what do you have installed. Okay, now that I have that, the second one's like, hey, okay, you approved them. We're going to send a command to install the patches that you approved. That's it. So everything that you see, it breaks down to that. Got to have communication because we got to get the inventory, and then we got to be able to send the command to say, hey, go to this download page from Microsoft in order to get those patches. Now, with that being said, we are going to download directly from Microsoft, so we're going to send a command to that device. That device is going to go to Windows Updates. There is the ability to set up caching, which is done by location. Yep. We have a webinar. If you check our university at ConnectWise.com. You go to our video library, we have a webinar how to set up caching. So it's all there, but you do have the ability to kind of cache it locally instead of having each individual device go out to Windows Update. So we do have ways to kind of get around that if you're worried about bandwidth, but it's all there for you to set up.
Before we move on, I do want to address, we have a lot of questions I see coming through on Windows 10 patching. So because we are at the helm of Microsoft, right? Because we're currently looking to their APIs, their Windows Update site. Within Patch Manager, we give you the ability to quickly see those agents that aren't communicating with with Windows SUS, as well as the Windows Update agent. So a lot of times when you're not seeing agents have 0 device inventory or patch inventory, it's because they're not communicating with that Windows Update site. So that's definitely troubleshooting step number 1. Also, in light of recent Windows 10 changes to patch management, we're only able to patch specific Windows 10 operating system versions, okay? And we are working with analysts at Gartner as well as some Microsoft patching experts to help further work with Windows 10 environments, because Microsoft is literally changing the game as we implement something new.
Unfortunately, when Microsoft decides to change something, they don't kind of bring us into the loop. They just say, hey, we changed it, and then we kind of find it after the fact. So that's another reason why we release the patches every month, is we can stay more agile in our releases. So if there are changes, we can adapt quickly to kind of respond to it. So we're constantly trying to see how Windows 10 is updating and how we kind of counter with developing our system, which makes it imperative to keep up with your patches, making sure you know what's coming out, because we're going to release enhancements and better functionality every month.
Yeah, and there's some roll-ups out there, especially when you see devices that have upgraded from Windows 7 over to Windows 10. There's certain, I want to say the standard operating system, and it's escaping me because I'm under the gun now. And so, but yes, there are certain roll-up packages that we have no control over, there's just hooks in there that we can't communicate to walk through.
Microsoft, they've kind of developed, hey, we want you patched, so we're trying to force it down their throat, and we're trying to adapt to that. So there's something we're just a little bit trying to just adapt to as they change their system.
Yeah, and you had mentioned testing before deployment.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
that's a big thing. For a lot of management of line of business applications that can be very finicky when you do roll out a Windows update, that's certainly a preemptive measure that you can take, right? Making sure that you have test devices within that test silo, so that you're rolling those patches out to test environments before you roll them out to production, because Windows updating isn't always perfect, and it can certainly cause some problems.
All right, so Windows patch management. So let's talk a little bit about third-party patch management. So with an additional license, you can it's already ingrained into the patch manager. All you have to do is get a license, and you can patch a number of third-party applications. And again, why are we doing this? Again, you can choose what and when. You have the ability to test before deployment, and we can also maintain versioning. So if there's a specific version of a third-party application you want to stick to, no problem. You can select that version, and you can kind of keep it there. So a lot of times, if it's Flash or even Google, like Google or Java, you want to stick to a specific version. Hey, lock here. I haven't tested the new one, so I just want all the devices to lock on this version. So we have the ability to control that within the third-party application.
Yeah, that's a big one for Java.
Absolutely. And automatic update definitions, if you want or you're interested in third-party, contact your account manager. They'll have all the details on how you get that implemented. You're going to see a bunch of screenshots a little bit later on. In my test environment, I am fully integrated, so you can kind of see what that's going to look like and how you can kind of operate within that. And I'll show you some of the cool bells and whistles that come with the third-party application, because there could be daily updated definitions, and we always want to maintain policy and approval. So if you want to keep them up to date, we want to make sure we have that ability to do that. So with the new patch manager, we primarily focus on, and you're going to get right out of the box, you're going to get Microsoft patches. That's just comes standard.
Absolutely.
Third-party is there, but you're going to need a license just to turn it on. So again, once it's turned on, you'll see all of the applications that we have. You can see we have a bunch of Adobe, Flash and Shockwave. We have VLC, 7-zip, Notepad++. And again, if you say, well, I want this application, not a problem. Hey, go in and tell us what you want, and we can QA it and see if we can get it in a future release.
Yeah, and that's definitely something I want to touch on is enhancement requests. So first and foremost, we want to add more third-party applications. We have been asking our pilot team and our PIN Partner Innovation Network, and they supply us with feedback. We have recently updated our enhancement forums. So if you go out into University today, under Community and then Forums, you'll see our enhancement forum. So feel free to go out there. This is a place that if you have any product in our suite, you can go out there and insert your enhancement request. Another really cool feature of this new type of software we're using for enhancement requests is it gives you the ability to search what other people are requesting. So other partners in the community, what's important to them, right? Maybe it's also important to you. It's kind of cool because it's smart enough to know if you start to write in, hey, well, I really want to see, a specific application for third-party patching, right? And then if somebody else has requested that same thing, it will actually find it and you can upvote it. So we are looking at those items that are being quickly upvoted by other partners, you know, supply and demand, right? So please use these enhancement forums to not only submit things like third-party application requests, but anything within the product.
Yeah, because when we said at the beginning where we release patches, part of that list of things in the patches are enhancements. So they come from this board, they come from ideas from all our partners out there,
That's right.
regardless of if it's a specific third party or any enhancement you see within the system, not just patch management, anything you see that could enhance the system, that's what that's for. And I love the fact that I go in there, I'm like, I want to see this. Oh, somebody already did this. Oh yeah, I want that too. So you can kind of see what everybody else is wanting. You can see that everybody's on the same page, and the more people we get, the more, further up the list it gets, which is cool.
And that's true. That's true. We certainly look at majority. Who's screaming the loudest? No, I'm just kidding. All right, so speaking of what's new, okay, so some of the things, and these are the things I'm going to show you, were most recently released in last month's patch. So again, we release a monthly patch. It's at the end of each month. So you can always look to the products and updates page to find the latest patch. In last month's patch, patch 17, we introduced things like last patch window, next patch window. This was a direct partner feedback request. People needed to understand what happened and what's coming next, and if it happened, you know, so things like understanding those patch windows and being able to see that display right into the patch manager console is super important. So make sure you're on your device view. That's where you're going to see this listed. You may need to scroll left to right if it doesn't all appear on your screen, but you'll see those 4 columns there. You see the third-party window also activated in this particular environment because we have third-party patching turned on in this environment. If you did not have that particular piece added on, you're not going to see that. But again, this was a great enhancement, again, fed by the partner community.
So I love this, the fact that I'm like, okay, well, here's all my devices. Hey, when's the last time they patch? When's the next time they patch? So I know, why am I, this one's at 90%, this one doesn't have anything. Well, you look right here, well, it hasn't patched since this day, so I haven't been doing anything here. So it allows me to troubleshoot, and that's really what we're looking at here is tracking problems. Well, I need to install patches. When was the last time? When was the next time? It's 2 things that I have to know when I'm troubleshooting my environment, which is really cool, and I love to see that we have
Yeah, exactly. As you can tell in the example that we have on there, you see empty patch windows there displayed for specific devices. And then if you notice, it has a device flag right there. That's because that agent hasn't been on in probably weeks. And so it hasn't had the ability to go out, get its inventory, and even be able to populate those last and next windows because it's not even communicating.
And even when you're in your system itself, when you hover over this, you'll see actually what those error messages are. You don't have to say, well, that's the ocean, so the computer was in the ocean. No, it's like an inventory issue, so I can kind of see what my error flags. I hover over it, it's going to tell me what exactly is going on there.
Exactly. So and another thing we added was install date. So it's important, especially in lieu of WannaCry, and things like, well, Equifax isn't really, that's just one thing, but it does give us the ability to now see by patch per device. So this is just the bottom part of the window that we previously saw from the last and next, right? So essentially, we're now giving you the install date by patch per device. And that really allows you to quickly use that search window, that search box right above it, so that you can find specific patches and then quickly see, hey, were they installed or were they not? And if they're not, understand why they weren't.
Good. And again, this is, if you were to highlight this device, then at the bottom of the screen is now, there's a current patches section here, and that's where you're going to see just the install date, which is the date that it was installed on this device. So again, very cool to kind of see, well, I've had this patch since September. All right, I'm cool. And if I need to search for specific ones, I can kind of do that. I can report on that and get that information.
Right, and we'll dive into the patch manager in just a minute, but As you can see on the left side, we're only looking at current patches for one specific device in this particular instance. So be sure that you're using your left side navigation to not only look at the current patches, but the patch history of those, as well as any patch jobs that are currently running, etc. Maybe you have a hung patch job. That is certainly going to indicate that you need to take action.
Cool. But yeah, it's cool we added that. All these others, if you've used these, we just added that current patches kind of view so you can kind of see some of this stuff.
And these are also feeding into the data views and reports that we've built out for Patch Manager, which we'll cover here in a moment. Another really important piece that we added in Patch 17, and I need you guys to put on your thinking caps here. I need you to pay attention because
we're about to do math.
We're about to do math, and it might get a little crazy. No, but the patch compliance setting. So we get questions all the time. How are you deriving your patch compliance score?
So as it stands now, well, before this patch, is when you look at your compliance score, is it straight 1-to-1 ratio? Is it looks at how many patches do I have approved against how many patches do I have installed? So if I've approved 100 and I've installed 80, well, then my overall compliance is going to be 80%. So that's easy math, don't have to worry about it. Now, the one thing that doesn't take into account there is any devices that I don't have a patch inventory for. So if I have an empty patch window, well, again, if we're doing straight math, if I don't have an inventory to do math against, well, then it's not going to count for that score. So if I have an empty window, well, then the math is going to be a little bit skewed if you don't understand where it's coming from, because we're going straight 1-to-1. What do you have approved versus what do you have installed, and we're just doing that 1-to-1 ratio. Well, now we've added the enabled device,
There
that
you
word.
go.
That's a word.
Device.
Device-based, there we go, compliance scoring, which allows me to average out everything. So now, if I have 4 devices, and one of them is at 100%, and the other 3 I have no patch inventory for, well, instead of giving 100% compliance where the old system did, now it's showing me 25%, because it's going to take an average of all 4 devices and show me kind of the aggregate of the overall score. So we got your feedback and you said, hey, this is kind of confusing. It's not showing me an accurate detailed list of my clients because I have devices that don't have an inventory. So now we've done the math and we've kind of set that up where now you can kind of average in your overall score to get a more accurate view of what's going on in your environment.
Yeah, go back for me real quick. So first and foremost, we put this check in because we didn't want to change the game on you, right? You go, you download the latest server patch, and then boom, somehow your compliance has all changed, right? So like he said, originally, we're not counting within the compliance score, we're not taking into account devices that aren't communicating with the Windows Update API, meaning they have 0 inventory. So 0 installed, 0 approved, etc., right? What we've done is we've put this check into the configuration under your settings, okay? So go to configuration and then your general tab, and you're going to see this compliance check here. So when you have it checked, now let's go to our, So when you have it checked, you're going to take into account that D device that has 0 patch inventory, right? So it hasn't patched anything. It doesn't know what to patch. Maybe because it's not checking in or it fell offline. Who knows? That's on you guys to kind of troubleshoot and figure out, right? So the, as Chris explained, the unchecked, so the first compliance score unchecked is looking at devices A, B, and C, because it's only looking at those patches that have been improved versus what's been installed, which gives you a 58%. Once we check that setting in the configuration under General, once we check that and we enable that device-based compliance scoring, essentially what that's going to do is now it's going to calculate in that D device, and it has 0. So it's going to drive your score down. So then what it's doing is it's actually taking the average of all of those devices and then averaging it out, right? So now we're looking at 188% divided by 4 devices. So you can see it dramatically increases your compliance score by 10% or a little over 10% just based on one device not having any patch inventory. So we've given you choice here, okay? That's the way it's working. You can turn that on if you want to account for those zero inventory
As it
agents.
stands right now, if you don't check that box, you're just going to go, hey, I have approved 60, I've installed 35, so my compliance score is going to show 58%. Again, when you check that box, which you have to go do, is now it's going to average in that 0, and so that's where I'm going to get, hey, here's my average 188 divided by 4 devices, and that's where I'm going to get that 46%. So if you check that box, all your numbers could change. It could go down because now we're taking into account any devices that don't have that inventory because we're taking an account to there. Now, as you're in your system and you're in the dashboard, if you click on a specific client, it's going to change those values. If you're looking at your global view, again, every time you filter on the left, it's going to change those values. So you can take a look at your client and go globally, and you can kind of break that down to see where you're at when you factor in that empty or that no patch inventory.
And it also adjusts the report. So don't worry, if you take into consideration and you go ahead and you make the check because you want to include devices that have no patch inventory, right? Because that's important to you to understand what would be a true reading, right? And that you're able to see those updated changes, the new compliance scoring within the patch compliance report. So we are making that change once you change that.
Gotcha. Cool, I love it. New things that we're adding.
Yeah,
and again,
just
all
give
this
some
stuff,
choice, right?
Yeah, and all this stuff came from you all. So
Yeah, exactly.
you requested, hey, I want this, I want that. I'm like, okay, so here we're delivering on what we say and getting this information out to the people that requested.
We're just giving the people what they want.
They're giving them what they
Chris.
want. That's what we do here. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about best practices. And whenever I talk about best practices, when it comes to patching, you're going to see me break a lot of stuff down into patch approvals and patch installs. So when I talk about patch approvals, it's going to be the classification of the patches. Do I want to install it? Do I not want to install it? And so when we're talking best practice, I want to break it down as like, how should I, kind of designate what I want to install versus how do I actually want to install them? And that's what patch approvals are, is deciding the classification of the patch. Patch install is how I'm actually going to install those onto my devices. So I kind of broke those into two different areas because we're going to separate those as we go through here and kind of show you how to set up your environment with a quick, easy 6-step process. So we're going to start on the patch approvals. And when we do that, what I love to see is set baselines and manage by exception. What I mean by that is I want to kind of look at my system globally. I want to set a baseline for what do I want across my entire system. And by default, our system is designed out of the box to say, hey, we have a group that has all of your devices in it. Is there a global baseline that you want to set? If you do, an example would be like, I want, no matter what, I want all my devices to have critical severity patches. That's
I want to
no doubt
all critical.
All critical severity. So that's going to be my baseline. And then, you know what? For my workstations, well, I want to expand that. And for workstations, I want critical category and security updates. But for servers, you know what? I just want important severity and kind of take it from that. So we want to set baselines, and then we kind of want to build off of that as we set a global picture and we kind of break that down into chunks and manage by exception. What I don't really want to see is you kind of try to do it client-based, because if you do client-based, then you end up applying the same policies to each individual client, and you're maximizing the load on your server, because we're going to process these things every 30 minutes. So we want to kind of think globally, and then, hey, when I'm globally, well, that doesn't solve everything. Okay, then I add another piece to it, and I add to it. I don't kind of copy and kind of keep doing the same thing.
So when you're adding to this, you're getting essentially multiple policies applied.
Yeah, correct. So I can kind of break it down however granular I want to get my system. You're going to see the power of the new patch manager, and kind of I want to kind of lay out the kind of framework to get you thinking about it, and then show you how we kind of apply it practically.
So set a baseline, and then you're managing by exception.
Correct. And here's what I kind of said, group level approvals is we don't want to do it by client, because what I see a lot of people get in the habit of, it's like, oh, well, I have this client that just wants to do this. So they create a client and they create a policy just for that. And then later it's like, oh, well, I have another client that wants to do the same thing. So, well, then I create that client and then I do the same thing. Well, if I focus on the patch first and then add the client to it, well, then that gives me the flexibility to say, okay, you want this too? Okay, well, I already have the policy created. Instead of going by client, I want to think group. Hey, get these devices in a group. I don't want to think by client. I want to think group-based.
what are your majority of your machines? I'm patching, workstations and servers, and then servers that are by role, right? Exchange servers over here.
Yeah, and especially for approvals is like, I want to deny a patch. I specifically don't want this patch. Well, I don't want to create a client and just deny it there. I want to deny the patch and I want to add all the devices into it. And you'll kind of see the method to the madness when I kind of show you an example of how this shakes down. Is just you don't want to really go by client. And the next thing we want to do is, once we kind of shaken all that down, is balance the risk of what is the risk for me installing this patch versus what is the risk of me not installing. What is going to be the harm done? So to approve or not to approve. So I want to kind of balance the risk, and that, that's going to take some time to kind of see what's going out there, how it's affecting, checking different websites and tech sites to see if anybody's having these risks. Because what I want you to do is validate and review. And it's a little bit different because I want you to make a decision on every patch within your system. It's very easy. It's like, okay, it's either I do install it or I don't install it.
Yeah.
All right. I want you to kind of get in the habit of, I want to make a decision in my entire system of whether or not I want this patch. Now it could be, it's like, well, I want it here, but I don't want it here. And that's where you kind of set your group levels and you set that accordingly. Well, I want it here, okay, install it here, but I don't want it here. Okay, so I put the devices in here that I don't want it at. So again, we start splitting that out, and you kind of see this kind of this formation of your groups to kind of take its own life of how you're kind of putting this together. Because if I manage by exception and I don't do it by clients, and I balance the risk, and then I start reviewing, everything starts to come together as you kind of build it on piece by piece, instead of trying to tackle everything and just be like, it's easy if I just do it this way. If you just kind of focus on the patch itself and kind of work your way back from the patch, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of manage moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving to the other side of things is, now we're talking about how are we actually going to get these patches installed.
Yeah, because that's just approving them,
this
right?
is just, going through every patch that I have in my system. Okay, I want to approve these. Okay, now how do I actually go about doing that? What are some best practices for that? Well, at the beginning, I don't recommend patching all your devices at the same time on the same day.
Right. Well, clients often want to have their own specific days.
But I don't want all your clients all doing. I want all 500 of my devices, I want patching on the same day. I want to stagger it out, even if it's between workstations and servers, or this half of my clients on this day, these half of my clients on that day, servers. I can break it down by server role. I just don't want to have one policy that can kind of controls it. And the reason I want to do that is, if I have a problem, well, now I'm not, just troubleshooting, just 10 devices that I patch this day. I'm now troubleshooting all 500. So again, this allows me to kind of stagger that to reduce the risk of any issues that I might have with a patch, because I can test it, but you know what? Oh, I forgot to test it on, Erin's machine that has this software, and you know what? It just didn't jive with her software.
Out, yeah,
one of those things. So again, it just helps you reduce the risk and kind of stagger it out accordingly. And this is going to be a conversation you're going to have with your clients. Is the frequency in which you patch? Do I have the leverage to do it daily, weekly, monthly? And within the system, you can go quarterly, you can go biannually or annually. I just don't recommend that. That's why you don't see that as a best practice. Because, as Microsoft releases updates, well, we want to test them. We want to see if we need to install them, because, hey, they're addressing vulnerabilities. I got to make sure that my system is protected. So this is when you talk to your partner, it's like, well, you know what, for workstations, I want to do daily. For these servers, workly. But you know what, for Exchange servers, we're going to do those manually. We're going to do those monthly. So the frequency is dictated by the conversation with your partners. And this is where, I had a conversation, Automation Nation. This is where I had a good conversation, and how we used, WannaCry as an actual positive.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how did you do that? Well, they're like, well, WannaCry might have been the best thing to happen to IT people, in the fact that now it forces our clients to listen to how important patching is. Because a lot of times, like, no, you can't patch on that day. No, I don't want my machine rebooted that day. Look, this is what we're dealing with here. Here's where you kind of use the scare tactic. Look, I need to install these patches. I need to schedule time. I can be flexible, but I need to get this done. And this is where we have to kind of be the subject matter experts here to say, hey, we're in charge of the security of this device. I need to get these patches installed.
Yeah.
And this is where you kind of have to set those expectations. How is it going to impact the user? Again, as I'm setting the frequency, I got to understand how it's going to impact, Joe sitting at his computer on a daily basis. And I have to be, I know I need to be flexible, but we kind of got to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, we have to get these in.
Well, yeah, and you need to make sure Joe leaves his computer on if you're going to patch at night,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. So you got to have all these conversations to make sure, hey, we're going to patch it, every week. I need to make sure that Joe is not going to be bothered by this. Do we reboot? Do we not reboot? Do we prompt the user? So these are all the things that we have at our disposal, but we got to make sure we're setting expectations correctly. Now, when I say customize, is we're going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about the default system and the way that it's packaged and kind of how to do that. Once you get to the point, it's like, okay, now I understand it. Now is where you customize it to tailor to your needs.
That's
like
that managing by exception, right?
Exactly. So now that, okay, now it's set, I'm like, well, this doesn't solve for everything. So now is when I start injecting my own groups, my own devices, and I put them in a structure and an order that makes sense to me. So again, when you learn kind of how we recommend how to set it up, once you learn the logic and you always say the method,
right?
The method to the madness, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, now that I kind of build there, then you just fill in the blanks where you need them. Fill in the gaps. Well, I can't do all my workstations on the same day. Okay, let's create a new group. Let's put these in here and let's put them in the right spot till I know it's going to be successful. So again, this is where we start customizing using the full power of Automate to automate your system. And then lastly, always recommend testing before deployment. And again, we have staging set in the new patch managers, where it allows me to say, you know what, here's 5 devices. Let's install patches for a week, see if anything breaks. And then I have a pilot. Well, you know what, here's a bigger section of devices. I'm going to patch those for 2 weeks. And so here's a small section, here's a bigger subsection. Okay, everything's good. And then I release it to production, which is, releasing it to the wild, which is all my devices.
And it's super easy to set that up. I mean, literally on the device view, I can target a device and set it to either go into my test silo or my production silo. And then you can set the times in between each one of those silos, very easy.
And I'll show you a screenshot. It's
Yeah.
just checking a box and
Checking a box,
depending on
figuring out how many
to.
days you want in
Yep.
between each kind of
Yep.
rollout. And then, if you find a bad patch through testing, you're just going to now take action on that bad patch.
Yeah, 'cause
I know that I now need to deny it on X server.
Yeah, and it's only going to pass over the approvals. So if I'm like have these test environments, oh, that's a bad patch, I ignore it, I deny it. Well, it's only going to copy over the approvals over to the next phase. So if you ignore it here, it's not going to go to the next phase. So it's smart enough to know, hey, that's bad. Okay, don't move that over to the next set.
Right.
All right, so that's a little
big
bit of
deal.
our
Testing before deployment.
Yeah, and we always harp on that with anything you do, especially within Automate. It's the same thing with scripting. You create a script, you test it. Same thing with patching. Hey, you have a patch, test it before you deploy it.
All right, so let's talk about setup.
All right, so
setup can be a bear, right?
It can be a bear, and I'm just going to focus on what we put together. If you look at our documentation, we come up with these 6 steps to perfect patch management. Now, this is just setting up your environment and kind of setting up, going into the configuration, setting the baselines, why I put these groups here and these groups there, and then creating the policies. And then now that I have my policies created, then I just go back and I assign them to my group. So it is that simple, and in theory, it's just getting everything organized to kind of fit what you want it to. And we start with organizing your groups. So my group structure is where I'm going to, again, talk about my patch installs and my patch approvals, because just like I broke down the best practices to how I want those, well, I'm also going to create my group structure to follow suit, as I'm going to break out my patch approvals from my patch installs, because I'm going to kind of control all the classifications of my patches in one section and then how I'm installing them in another section. And again, it's going to look, when you're all said and done, it's going to look something like this. Now, this is me coming in the system and kind of designing what I want. Now, if you're new and you're like, well, my system doesn't look like that, well, good news, if again, you go into our university, I have a how-to video that says, hey, how to quickly organize your patch group.
You have this guy has a 4-part webinar series on all of this
You're
stuff.
you're gonna hear my voice and see my face a lot if you go to our university and have anything patching. All of this stuff kind of designed to kind of help you implement it. Just quickly organize your patch groups, and you can kind of see I section off into 2 different phases. I have approvals, denies, organize, which I kind of lump into all my approvals because I'm talking about classification of the patch. And you can see there's a firm line where I have patch install. Patch install is where I'm going to actually set the day and time and apply when I'm going to install those patches. So I just break these out into 2 sections because I'm going to handle them differently. And this first part of organizing your group is just getting this to look like this. That's really all you want to do at this phase, is kind of getting it in an order. I have my approvals default, which is that group that has all my devices. So this allows me to push
kind of
out
like
that
the default
baseline.
template.
Exactly. It's like I have the ability to say, hey, I want to set a baseline, and these are the patches I want approved or ignored across my entire system.
Globally.
And then this is where I assign, hey, there's where I do all my critical severity. Well, I'm going to put that on all my default. That's going to go across my entire system. Then I have workstations. Well, you know what? In addition to the default, what do I want to add to workstations? In addition to default, what do I want to add to servers? And then we kind of stop there, and this is where you pick up, well, you know what, I need more workstations, I need more servers. Well, go ahead, create a new group and put it in there where it kind of makes logical sense. So I organize this.
And these are your approval groups,
yes,
right?
Yes, exactly. So this is where I'm just designated the classification of the patch. Do I want it?
Do I want to install or do I not want to install?
Correct. Approve it or ignore it or deny it. And here's where you see where I drink the Kool-Aid and practice what I preach. I'm like, if I want to deny a specific patch, or I'm going to create a group and deny that patch, deny it, and I'm going to add devices into that group that denies it. I'm not going to say client, hey, client A, deny this patch. And then client B is like, oh, wait, they also need this patch denied. And then I'm trying to do it by client. No, I'm focusing on the patch first, and then I'm adding the devices to it. So this allows me to get granular as I grow my system. So I have my default approvals, workstation servers, and all my deny groups. And there's where you start.
And that's out of the box,
And that's out of the box. You quickly set up and organize your groups, and you're going to have kind of this function. And you can kind of bring in different groups. You can create your own groups. But I just want to get you to start here. And if you go to that, you go to the how-to video, it shows you a very quick way to just boom, start clean, and kind of get done and kind of looking at this screen. Because at the first thing, this is probably the most confusing thing about your entire patch setup, is why I'm doing that. And it's because I want to separate the classification of the patch from the day and time that I'm installing them.
Yeah.
And as we go through this,
right,
it'll make more sense.
Yeah, you're keeping, just think about it in 2 silos, approvals and installs.
Correct.
So out of the box, and what happens if they're using Ignite? So say they're a partner that's upgraded and they were using the patching tab under Ignite.
So if you bring in, now first of all, when you kind of upgrade, you're going to go through the wizard. It's going to ask you if you want to bring in any of the approval groups that you have. Now on the flip side, you're going to lose all your schedules. So got to kind of throw that warning out there. So if you're coming over all the days and times that you've used in the past, those are going to get wiped out. We use a completely different mathing sequence, there's math again, that we had to blow out all the existing schedules in order to upgrade to the new one. But you can bring in all those approvals that you have. So any group, when you run the wizard, we're going to go through your groups. We're going to say, hey, have you made a classification on a patch in any group in your entire system? It doesn't matter if you did it 5 years ago. It's like, hey, this group, we had a patch classification on it. We're going to say, hey, do you want to bring this over? And you're going to say yes or no. All right, so you can bring all those in and you can kind of input those and kind of move them around. I can highlight a group and I can use these arrow keys to put them exactly where I want them. So I can set it up in a logical and ordered manner. If you are using Ignite, and I'm glad you brought that up, because if you look at this structure, it's the exact same as Ignite, it just looks differently.
Yeah.
Because you remember the Windows Updates.approve group that we always said to install patches on? Well, in the tree version, in that view, well, you set it there and it automatically got inherited to servers and workstations. That's the way the old system was set up. Right. So here, I just have a flat structure where I have a group that has all my devices, and then I have workstations and servers that I can kind of append to that.
That are based on onboarding.
It's the exact same system that you had in the past. So this allows me to kind of, hey, if you're new, here's an easy way to organize it where it makes sense. Hey, if you're old, it's the exact same, because we had our Windows Updates group. We had our Windows Updates.approve that had these 3. Then I had my deny rules, which is all my deny groups. And they were exactly in this order. So I, kind of streamlined this exactly the way it used to be. Now you just see everything right in front of you. Nothing's getting inherited. I'm just focusing on this group is doing this thing. Mm-hmm. So now that we have everything organized, so now it's the easiest part is creating the policies. Because I have my Microsoft Update policies. Well, this is just my Microsoft Updates, and this is just deciding what time on what day that I want to install patches.
And or Windows.
Windows patches, sorry.
Right.
Windows Updates,
right.
yeah. So here, it's just picking a day and time that I want to do. Now, when you come in here, we're going to have the normal ones that we always had. Every day and each day of the week from 3 to 5, that was your base template setting that you had in the old system. I added a do not patch. This is my system to kind of show you just the functionality that you can do. Here I can, patch as frequently as I want. I can select a specific day, the occurrence of that day every month. I can do the first, third, and last. I can do, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I have the ability to kind of blow this up. If I needed to, I can select a specific date. I want to patch on, the 4th and the 17th of every month. Yeah. I have the flexibility to do that. And I can just create as many policies as I want. Just click this plus button, create a policy, create a policy. I can get as granular as I want. I can patch once a quarter. I can patch once a year. I don't advise that. My recommended practice is at least try to do it once a month. The only exception I usually have are Exchange servers, and usually I patch those manually. Yeah. But anyway, that's me. That's not you. That's my own, OCD issues that I have to deal with. But this just gives me the ability to do that. In the old system, you remember I had to do everything at the location. And you know what I said at the location, then I had 3 custom windows that I got to use from. Well, if I need to be, more flexible than the 3, what do I have to do? I had to create a new location, I had to put the devices in there, and then I had to set those custom patching in. That's very true. So I was kind of limited. Here, knock yourself out for as many update windows that you want to create. I can get as granular as I want, I can do whatever I want, I can get fancy, I can keep it simple.
Well, and what's even better is that we've tacked on the scripting portion. So now if you needed to stop a line of business application, like stop a specific service before you install a specific patch, you can do that.
So we have the ability to run a script before or after the install.
And then you can label that, right? Yep. So giving you choice.
As we move through, third party is going to be the exact same. If you have the license, you're going to have this section. You have the ability to and it's going to be the exact same system as Microsoft. So there really isn't anything there. The only difference with third party, there aren't going to be anything built in there. You have to build them all yourself. So here I just built these to kind of show you what that would look like and kind of mimicked what I did for my updates.
Are you talking about the everyday 1 through 3?
Yep, yeah. I built that. And then you can see that I did them from 1 to 3 as opposed to 3 to 5 because I really don't want to, as a recommended practice, install third party the same time that I do Microsoft updates.
There you go,
so again, so you kind of offset that. Reboot windows, again, I have 4 different things to choose from. I'm going to determine whether or not I want to reboot my systems as part of the patching process. I can suppress a reboot. I can do it during the Windows window. I can schedule it. Now that scheduling, it has to have gone through patching. This just isn't, hey, patch these devices on Thursday at 2. It actually has to go through patching. It has to have that reboot pending flag checked in order for that to schedule and actually reboot. And then I have the disable reboot window, all the options you had before, plus the scheduled and the suppress reboot. I have the ability to do that. So this is just you deciding how you want to handle reboots. I create a policy again. I can do any setting that I want, and the sky's the limit here.
Wait, before you go from that, I just do want to draw everybody's attention to the bottom of the screen where it says applied to. So this is a great place to come and understand where your specific policies are applied. So a lot of times, you can't remember that you've put a specific policy on a client or, in a specific group. And that's one quick way to tell.
Absolutely. So the last are all my approval groups. Now this is where I design how I'm going to automate the classification of patches. So I have the ability to automatically approve, automatically ignore, automatically deny any patch within my system. And here it just gives me the ability to do that. Again, you can see here I have a third party. So I've created all these individual third party approval policies to handle those individually because that's how I handle third party applications. But you can see here's my approvals default. So this falls in line with my group that was my approvals default group that has all of my devices in it. So this is me setting that baseline. What is my baseline going to be that I'm assigning to all my devices? Well, here, I'm going to turn it on, requires recreating approval. That's what signifies that as my default approval policy. And you can also see on my default approval policy, here's where I can turn on staging. And it's tied in with this checkbox. So if I don't check this box, I'm not going to get staging. And if I don't check this box, well, it's not going to be enabled. So I can choose to have a default policy and not stage, or I can tie all those together. So again, it is easy as checking the box. How long do I want to test? 1 week. How long do I want it in pilot? 2 weeks, and then after that, it automatically goes into production. By default, all of your devices are going to be in production. You have to go into the device screen and actually tell them which section you want them to be in, or which stage you want them to be in. And then it's just for me. You know what? For my baseline, I'm going to do critical updates, and I'm going to do important and critical category severity. So this is going to be across all of my devices. I want, at a minimum, I want these. And you know what? While I'm here, I'm going to automatically ignore drivers, and I'm going to automatically ignore language packs. I'm going to make that part of my baseline. Hey, I don't want drivers because, you know what, I've had to roll back drivers more than I had to update them, so I'm just going to ignore them. And you know what, if I need a specific language pack, I'll do that as a one-off. So as my default, it's going to automatically approve these and automatically ignore those, and that kind of sets my baseline. I assign that to my approvals default group, and that sets my baseline. Then I can come in here, and I can do specific server ones, and I assign that to my servers or my workstations. I can assign those to my workstations, and I can decide what I want to do automatically.
Well, and you know, let me interject, because I see that you have it not highlighted, but checked here on this particular view, and that's the CVSS. So being able to set up specific approval policies based on CVSS score is huge, right? Because you may have certain clients out there that have to append to specific compliancy policies, right? And so that you can set specific approval policies set up for them. So hey, any patch that is inventoried and has a lower CVSS score than what 7 you're showing here, they need to go. They need to be approved automatically and installed. So I think that that's a really great way for those clients that you're trying to really keep a close eye on for compliance.
And again, I can create as many approval policies. I can assign multiple approval policies to an individual group. I have the flexibility to do that. So now that I have all my policies created, now I just add the policies to my groups. And you can see here, I created my group structure, I created my policies, and then here I just assigned them. So you can see, one thing I want to point out is you can see all of my approvals. Well, you don't see an update policy, third party, or reboot, because I'm only worried about classifications. So on my approval groups, I'm only assigning classification to patches. I'm separating those completely out. I'm only focused on my approval groups, the classification of the patch. And then my patch install groups, this is where I designate the day and time I'm going to install patches or third party and how I'm going to handle reboots. So I break those out. I set my approval policies only on these, and then I break down how I'm going to install them here. And I separate these up and these down because they're actually processed way different, which we're going to get into right now. But this is just me creating my group structure, create my policies, assign the policies, and you're ready to rock and roll. And until you actually assign policies to groups, nothing's going to happen in your system. You're not going to start patching, you're not going to start approving until you actually apply these policies to the groups. Everything's going to be golden, you don't have to do anything.
Cool.
Now, for my approval policies, priorities.
Let's talk about the priorities here.
So again, priorities based on the approval classification. So the reason I put those up at the top, because I only care about the classification of the patch. And we're going to have 5 settings. Not set, which means I haven't done anything, which is going to be my lowest priority. Ignore, approve, remove, and deny is going to be my highest.
And those are in order.
Those are in order from highest, from lowest to highest, going down the list. So not set, then ignore, approve, remove, deny. So it doesn't matter where it is in the grid. It just matters the classification of the patch. So you saw me kind of set up my kind of default where, you know what, I automatically approve these, automatically ignore those. What if I need to deny a patch? Well, I deny a specific patch, and I do that because if I deny a patch globally, I lose the availability to install that anywhere because it's my trump card.
Yeah.
I can't override a deny. That's why I seriously
That's why we create the group, right?
That's why we create the group to deny. We don't assign a deny patch to a global thing. We deny the individual patch and we add the devices that need that to it. So again, because I can't trump a deny. So again, kind of learning how all that shakes out. And you can see this is why I have my approval policies here. And I kind of just go by the classification of the patch. It allows me to kind of, okay, here's how they're getting applied. Because a lot of people's like, oh, well, I want to deny a patch on my DC.
So I'm just going to go to the patch.
I'm just going to go do that. And I'm like, well, I don't want you to do that because, well, you might split up your DCs. And I may have a separate group for DCs. And then, well, now I have to deny that patch there. But if I deny the patch and then I add my DCs that I need to that group, it simplifies the process. It keeps everything standard. And I can build on that. I can add to it. I can remove it. And I can kind of move forward with that. So again, kind of going around this kind of best practice methodology. It's adaptable, and you can kind of tweak it and add to it as you see fit.
Got it.
Now, on the flip side, the reason I have my patch installs at the bottom is because priority is determined by placement in the grid. Now, we had a discussion about this.
We did have a discussion.
And it's like, well, you know what is the wording? What is the simplest way to kind of do this? And the lower the priority, or the lower the priority, the higher in the grid, the higher the priority and the lower in the grid. Now, what the heck does that even mean?
It's confusing, Chris. It's confusing.
And we want to talk specifically about update and reboot policy. So my Microsoft update, my third party, and my reboot policies. And all we're doing is, as you see it in the grid, is how it's going to be applied. So the higher in the grid is going to be lower priority.
So, and I want to take us back to the first thing that you said on your best practice. And that was, you set a baseline, and then you're going to manage by exception.
Correct.
So essentially, that's how your priorities are working. Those baselines live at the top of your list. And they're going to have the lowest priority because you're going to get more granular as you move down.
Like you see, you can see workstations. Hey, they're not as important as my servers. Well, my DC is more important than regular servers, and all the way down the list, my VM host is more important there. Because I could, I'm going to have a machine that's in my servers
both roles
and in my VM host. They're going to have both of those. So how does it decide? Well, the where it is in the group is going to easily dictate that it's going to show up here, because if I'm in multiple groups, I know the one at the bottom, those are the settings that are actually going to get applied.
Well, so again, the schedule.
Yes, the schedule. I'm just talking about the update and reboot policy.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with approval.
Nope, that's why I keep those completely up, and I separate those two devices. Hey, my approvals are in one section. I have a completely different conversation than here, because the classification, the patch is my approval policies. Where it lays in the grid is my patch install. And you can see I keep these down here.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, that's why I separate those out. And I keep these at the bottom, which as you see in your default system, that's the way they are out of the box. So again, this allows me to say, well, my VM host, if I'm in both of these, well, I know that my VM host is going to patch Saturday at 3 and 5 instead of Monday, and they're going to suppress that reboot. So
yeah,
again,
now if you didn't once, let's say we went through, because a lot of this is controlled by onboarding, right? I onboard a new device. That device goes through role detection. We detect that, hey, this device is acting as a server, but it's also a VM host, right? So it gets put in both of those groups.
Yep.
But essentially, because of the priority, right, it's getting more granular, we know that VM hosts need a different set of patches. They might need a different install schedule based on just general servers. So what I can do is, if I didn't want that particular VM host, I could just pull it out of that group, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's not going to get that. It would append to the previous server.
Yeah, because there isn't anything fancy about how we do this. The groups are the groups. Just because it's in Patch Manager, the bottom line of all of our groups is search populates, we join the search to the group, and then all the devices in the search. So search group policy, that rules the land in Patch Manager. I populate a search based on characteristics, I add that to a group, and then here, if I don't want a specific device in there, well, I change the parameters, or I add it to the group, create a new group with new parameters. So again, this is just understanding the system as it is, and then you customize it, you add to it as you need to. And as we're going through here, I know we got stuck on a couple points here. Use your reporting. In the new report center is we have a compliance score, which shows me my overall compliance. Then I can kind of see my individual devices. All of that is in there. You kind of breaks down with this new system. We have a patch audit, which I got a little click happy, which is an individual machine where I can see the client score, the location score, and then the individual server score, and then you can see all the patches and whether or not they're installed. So you can kind of just do what it is. It's a patch audit, and I can see the install date and see where all that information is. I can pull that in here. So if somebody says, hey, I need to see this patch, boom, it was installed on this day. It is showing it's installed, so you can have that information readily available.
And one thing I do want to note, specifically with reports, the reports you're looking at right here are in the report center, okay? Mm-hmm. The report manager is what we call legacy. It's still there because we know a lot of people customize reports, but if you have moved over to the new patch manager, which I hope all of you are, and if you haven't yet, please do, because the next version, Automate 12, will require you to be using the new patch manager.
Yep.
So all the new patch manager compliance scores, the auditing, all of this stuff is feeding Report Center, not Report Manager.
Correct.
Okay. Just need to put that out there.
No. And like, again, if you're using third party, we have a third party patch audit, which shows me, you know, here's my device and here's all the product listed. Hey, here's when it was installed, update only. If it's not there, which is cool, is I'm not going to keep it update, but I can kind of control that from here. So we have a report specifically for third parties. And then we also have our data views. You can pull the information there as well. All your patch history, your legacy patch settings. If you kind of migrated from Ignite, you can see what everything was, how it was set up before, so I can create my new policies to match. Like I said, we blow out those schedules when you upgrade.
And we have incorporated a couple new data views within patching data views for you in lieu of WannaCry, as well as some other things.
Yeah, and the WannaCry, you can't actually get it from the Solution Center. Just search for WannaCry, and you can pull down that data view
and install
where it is.
Yeah. Also, one thing, if you are right-clicking from the navigation tree and you're right-clicking and running a report that way, that is not accessing Report Center. It's accessing legacy Report Manager. And for a hook for my next version, our next version, we are in this together. We will have changed all that, okay? So anytime you're right-clicking and you're running a report directly from a client, it will pull the updated new Report Center reports. That's correct.
All right. So I know we're kind of out there.
But yeah, let's roll through it.
We're just going to roll through some third-party patching. Again, this is a license. It is in there. You just need a license to access it. If you go to our documentation page and look for third party, it's going to show you all of our third party applications that are covered. Here's the current list as it stands yesterday. Make sure I kind of go in there to make sure I get the most up to date. We have Adobe, we have Apple, so anything that you're kind of looking at, if you want to add to this list, again,
enhancement form.
Harping back, we're going through the enhancement form to kind of get that information. Now, again, for my third party patching, it's the same thing. We're going to create that group structure to handle it. Now, with my group structure, I can just assign the policies accordingly. So I don't need to break from anything that I'm doing. So it is just a policy for third party. The one thing about third party is you can't automate those. You create the policy, but you have to manually assign them. When I'm going to creating an approval policy, when I see the approve, ignore, deny, those right now as it stands only affect Microsoft products.
Windows, yeah.
So Windows patches. So again, I create the policy there, but then I can apply them in the approval section. So here, I can just go about my day and I can assign it out there. Or what I like to do is, you know what, if you're going to say I can get fancy, you know me, I'm going to get fancy. So what I have the ability to do is customize it. That allows me to go into approval policies, and you can see, you saw a screenshot of it earlier, is I'm going to create an approval policy for each application that I have, and it's going to have their own approval policy, and I'm going to decide what I want to do with that. And then to take it a step further, I have here, and I come in here, and here's where I go to my approvals, and then I load that specific policy, and then I can kind of manage the filters through the manufacturer and decide how I want to handle that. So again, I have to create them in the configuration approval policies, then I can load them in the approval section, and then I can kind of do with them what I want. Here I show you my defaults. For my third-party defaults, you know what, I'm going to ignore most everything, but you know what I'm going to do is if you have Flash, I'm just going to tell you to update it. Yeah. Don't install it, but just update it. And that default, I'm going to assign to all my devices. Again, the same policy applies, is I'm going to handle third party the same way I handle Microsoft patches. I create a policy, decide what I want to do with it, and then I apply it to a group.
Well, and that's the beauty of using our third party patching is that we're able to leverage our native console. So it's keeping you all in the same console. You're able to, you already are understanding how the Microsoft policies, Windows update policies are working. And then you're leveraging things like testing before deployment. We talked about the versioning that you're able to control and manage and maintain by using this.
Yeah. So it's really cool. And then for me, I got to take it a step further, is I can go into the device and I can create.
Using extra data fields. Look at you, all fancy.
Is I'm creating extra data field with just a checkbox on all my agents, and I can decide by agent which one do I want to install on this device. And this allows me, again, I'm going to go to the device level. It makes it scalable, and I can kind of create an extra data field And then what do I do with extra data fields? Well, I tie it to an individual group. So if I check it on the agent for 7-zip, well, it automatically goes into this 7-zip group. And guess what? I apply the 7-zip policy. So this is me kind of
taking
showing
it
you one step further of what's possible.
Do you outline this in that 4-part webinar series?
For third parties specifically, no, that is on my list to do because we're redoing all of our webinars for 12.
Okay.
So look to our video library, but I'm adding this functionality to it.
Yeah, because that would be great to understand, because that's the power of ConnectWise Automate, is we give you the ability to really get fancy and customize stuff.
And
the way I like the way that you're leveraging the extra data field to automatically dump them into the groups that you've created.
And that's the way that's why I tie everything. Is like, how do I simplify it? Create a checkbox. If it checks the box, goes into search, populates a group, apply the policy. Search, group, policy. It all goes down to those 3 things. Search group policy controls everything. Absolutely. Yeah, and this is, and what I showed you with the first screenshot is pretty much what's out of the box, and this is how I kind of adapt and kind of manage my system. Is like, hey, now I add third party. Okay, here's what I can do. I create the extra data field. I have a group, and then boom. And the cool thing about it is I can create the extra data field in my system, but I can create the search and the group all within the patch manager. I don't have to jump out to the navigation tree. I can do all that in here. Have to go out to create the checkbox, but I can do everything else in here.
So I want it. How do I get it?
Well, I can set it up for you.
Okay.
But this isn't something that just comes standard. This is one of those customizations, but I'll outline it and look for...
Well, I mean, I want third-party patching now.
Oh, well, contact your account manager.
Okay.
I'll even show you how to do that in just 1 second.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh my God, it's the next slide.
Oh, I know.
Who
See,
knew that?
I was
oh,
feeding
did you know that? She's
psychic,
this lady.
I was
So I want it. Okay, well, go to connectwise.com/account manager. Boom, you put in your email address and it's going to do some fancy magic Harry Potter stuff in the background, and poof, your account manager for you should pop up and their contact information. You can go out there saying, oh, I just saw this awesome webinar with Aaron and some other guy, and hey, they were selling third party and it was awesome, and I want all of that stuff.
So yeah, so we're put a poll up, and if any of you out in our audience are interested in third-party patching, let us know. We'll just have your account manager reach out to you. That way you don't have to, you know.
Yeah, it's easier.
You don't have to call somebody.
You're here,
they'll
just check
call
a box.
you. Don't
just
call us, we'll call you.
Right here. And as always with third party, same rules apply, just like Microsoft patches is test before deployment.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now our last real thing is just third party definitions. I just want to show you what we can do. When you do get that license, because you did say you want it, okay, now I've installed it. You want to go into and restart your database agent, and that's going to kind of pull in all of that information. You kind of got to restart the system in order to pull the new information in.
Yeah, because it's doing a license server check, and then that's how it kind of turns it on.
Yep, and so you're going to have to restart the database agent. And then once you get there, you're going to just see everything populate. You're going to see Adobe, and you're going to see all the titles and all the ones that we have, and then you're going to see all the versions pop up, and then you can go in and you can kind of make those determinations on whether or not you want them. And then again, if you want to gather patch information, in the configuration general section, there's this gather patch information. This runs automatically every 4 hours, but if you want to kind of update that manually, you have the ability to do that. Now, I just want to stress it does run every 4 hours, so you don't have to worry about that specifically for third-party definitions. Now, again, to approve these, I put those gears in there because it is a manual process. I can create the approval policy, but right as it stands right now, I have to manually decide, hey, go in here, approve this. Hey, go in here, ignore that. I have to manually do that, but I did talk to the product manager, and I know that automating that is in the roadmap. I don't know specifically when that's for, but I got it on the list earlier this year. And what's cool about that is I can decide whether to update only or update and install. And this is why it's not automated, because you have to make a choice. And you can only do that when you load it manually. So I can say, hey, if you already have it, go ahead and update it. But if you don't have it, don't install it. So again, that allows me some leverage. Or I can update install, hey, go ahead and update it and install it in the process. So you have the ability to do that. And then we also talked about version control is, hey, for this specific application, whenever a new one is out, stay current. Or I want to lock in. You know what? 23.00162, that works the best for me. So just lock it in with that version. So with third party, I can decide whether to update it or update and install it. and which version I want it to stick at. So again, there are some applications out there that you might just want to stick to a specific version.
Yeah, Java is a big one that
Yep.
we want to control and maintain versioning.
Now, all of this information is available for you, and I have, in our education documentation, you have our patch manager link, and you're going to have all of our links to our documentation. You're going to have our blueprints, which breaks down all these processes. You're going to have all the videos. You can see every section has got its own video, so we have specific how-to videos. We have university courses where you can kind of go through this for patching, and then here's that 4-part patch webinar series that I put together over the last year or so, and it just breaks down navigation, configuration, practical uses, and then there's that setup guide to quickly get you up and running. Now, I'm a big fan of my blueprints because this breaks down each section of the patch manager, and everything that you want more information on, you click on it, it's going to take you to either a how-to video, a webinar, or it's going to take you to a direct link to where that topic is discussed in our documentation. So each of the 5 sections broken down in all the sections that live there, all of it's going to be right here. So this gives you a global view of the patch manager called Getting Started Patch Management.
Yeah.
The other one is client function, and this is that
I like that.
pretty much that 6-step process. I just added the patch manager wizard, then organize your patch groups, define your policies, and then assign policies to group. This is breaking down that 6-step process into a diagram and just walks you through, hey, here's all of the definition of why I do approval groups and patch install groups. Here's a setup guide, here's to quickly organize, and then how I kind of set all of that stuff up. So the resources are there for you. We have a page, we redid our documentation to kind of break these down accordingly to what you're looking for, and the blueprints map all of that together for you. So everything is right there. We built all that for you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a lot of information. We get that it's, you know, again,
it's intense.
It's an intense thing. Once you get it, though, you'll be able to roll it out.
And that's why I always kind of start small, start basic. Let me start here. Let me kind of get my structure. Once I get my structure down, I understand how I have it set up. Then I'll kind of reach my limits, and then I kind of add to it, and I put the groups where I want, where it kind of makes the most sense. And all that is broken down within the resources here.
Yeah. So let's just take, I know we're way over on time. We'll take a few questions. We will be answering your questions and try to get all those questions answered within the next couple of days. We will be taking those offline, and we will try to get to all of your questions. But let's just take a few out there. So what about hosted servers? Do you automatically update? So Jerry out there is asking, no, we do not. So any hosted servers like your VM hosts, those are something that you do manually need to take care of.
And if you want to, I kind of had a different kind of conversation with different partners regarding this. What I would let you do is patch them, but don't reboot them. Don't ever set up a reboot for that. I would suppress a reboot for all my VMs, because the way it does that, it doesn't care. It doesn't look that you have other hosted devices on this machine. Because if you issue a reboot, it's not going to say, oh, hey, unless you run a script, it's going to just shut everything down. So when you issue that reboot, just know it's going to look at that as a normal device and just shut it down. So all of anything on there
connected to it
is going to be in there. And that's where you leverage kind of that, if you want to, you leverage that run script before, run script after. So if you want to shut these down gracefully before you do that, you have the ability to do that. But typically, you know, I can go either way for VM hosts and Exchange servers, and I kind of treat those kind of differently. I may kind of offset a section where, you know what, for these devices, I'm going to have my own approval group, and I'm only going to approve, you know, manually a few devices. And that's just so I can go to the device and see what I've approved, and I can manually install them. You can install them, and you're at your discretion on what you do and how you do it. If you do it automatically, I definitely suggest you suppress the reboot. You make sure that no reboot assignment is assigned. But even for Exchange servers, and I'll even throw VMs in there, for me personally, I would probably handle those manually so I know it doesn't affect anything. Exchange servers are still going to be one of those things. And you know, these are, you know, as we're moving forward to even 365 and all that, you know, you're not really getting away from that. I know specifically back in the day, Exchange servers were very complicated. I know it's simplifying, but still, I'm still treating those with kid gloves.
So I see a couple of questions that are very similar in nature, talking about which specific versions of Windows 10 can you not patch. So we do have a, oh gosh, I think it's a supportability statement out there. So if you search our KI is it within Docs, I believe? Are you trying to go to it? That would be awesome. I think it's under resources. Anyways, we do have a supportability statement out there does show which versions of Windows 10 we're updating.
It was just there.
Yeah. So I'm just going to keep on rolling.
If you search for Windows 10, we have a supportability statement, and that'll kind of
break down
what it is.
Yeah, which branches we're able to.
So in there, just look for Windows 10 in the search and documentation, and boom, you'll be able to find it. It'll actually populate and put it in there.
So Andy out there says, hey, is there an option to automatically apply patches every month? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's how you're going to set it up through policy. Okay, so you do have the ability to say, hey, I just want to approve every single thing, whether it's critical, security, important, you know, or just a...
You say once a month?
Yeah.
So...
Oh, no, he just said every month apply patches. Is there an option to automatically apply patches every month? Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to automatically say what you want to approve, right? And then set up the schedule to, if you're looking at monthly, certainly set that for a monthly and roll that out.
So here, if you want to do, I mean, pretty much you have to set what day you want it on. So I can select the date, and then here, if I want to patch the last day of the month, I do that. If I want to pick which month, it's going to default to every month. If you want to do it every month, you pick the day that you want to do it on, and boom, you want to do last day. And the reason I show last day, because a lot of people is like, oh, I'll do the 31st. Well, February doesn't have 31 days, and half the other months doesn't have 31 days, so you're going to miss those months. So if you want to do last day, you got to make sure if you select a day that it actually exists in all the months. So 28 is the last one you know will work every year. But all you have to do is pick the day. It's going to default to every month, and this is the day and time you want to install patches. Now, as far as approving patches, that's going to be, you know, whenever the patch comes in, if you have a automated approval system, as soon as a patch comes in, it's going to classify the patch, and it's going to show up on the device. Now, that's going to happen whenever Microsoft releases new patches, or a new patch that you've never seen before shows up. It's going to go by that. But you can control when I actually install it. You want to do it once a month. You can do it whenever you want. This is completely customizable to do whatever you need it to do.
Even going by that CVSS score,
yep.
Right? So, you know, CYA, essentially, you can set what's, you know, certain compliancy, set it at whichever CVSS score that you need it to be set at, and then it's going to go ahead and automatically approve those and then install it based on the schedule.
Yeah, but
so Casey out there says, well, what about removing patches? So that's kind of a slippery slope.
Yeah,
some uninstall easier than others, and
so Microsoft is going to Microsoft is going to classify it whether or not it's removable. We do have a classification. You saw it in there. It's not set. It's ignore approval, then remove, and then deny. So we do have the ability to kind of set it to remove when you classify patches.
But not every patch
is removable.
That lives out there is removable.
So here's the remove. So I can classify the patch as remove. And what that does, it actually acts like a deny. If it's not installed, we're going to treat it like a deny. We're not going to let it get installed. If it is installed, well, we're going to try to remove it. And if it's removable, then we're gonna do it, and it's gonna do it based on your install window. So it's not, if I classify patches remove, it's gonna automatically try and do it. It's gonna say, well, I patch every Wednesday at 3. You set this patch to remove, it's gonna try and remove it at 3. Now, if I have a patch that I want to try and not automate that process, I do have the ability to find the patch within the patches section. I can search for that patch wherever I find it, and I can try to uninstall patch from that device. You can see I highlight this patch, it shows me all the devices that it applies to, and then hey, well, okay, if I have that in here, I can manually try and get it from there. But it's going to be the same process. So if you set it on the policy, it's going to go by that window that you have assigned. If you want to try and manually do it, I can find the patch, see what device it's on, and I can try to uninstall it from here. So again, there is 2 ways to handle that.
Yeah. So I don't know how to say your first name, and I'm not going to try to, but we do have someone out in our audience that says, in my lab tech, the patch manager is different. How do I update it to see it as you? So you're probably using the, well, again, we're calling legacy patch manager.
Or Ignite patch
yeah,
manager.
and you could be on version 10.5. So if you're not on version 11, you won't see this new patch manager that we're looking at. When you upgrade to version 11 and you launch Patch Manager, so when you click the button on the toolbar, it will prompt a wizard. So if you're still using the legacy Patch Manager, which would look very different than the Patch
Yes.
Manager we're talking about today, you need to go through that wizard. And again, I highly advise that you go through some of Chris's blueprints. You check out that 4-part webinar series, because again, it's not an easy thing to kind of just willy-nilly
wrap your head around it. And that's what we do. And you have to be a super admin to run the wizard, so it's not like anybody can do it.
Yeah.
So you have to have the level
That's
1
a great point.
permission. But if you go to the blueprint, there is a section called Patch Manager Wizard. It's a how-to video that walks you through the wizard. How to upgrade is a link to our documentation site. All of that is here. Even if you go to here, you click on the main patch manager, it's going to be all of the webinar series and how to navigate the patch manager. So if it's in our documentation, if we have a video on it, trust the blueprints. It's going to go, especially for setting up, it's going to be step by step on how to do it. If you want a global view of everything within Patch Manager, that's going to be my Getting Started blueprint, and it breaks down every section. But if you click on that, hey, here's the place to start. Just like Patch Manager, navigating, configuring, practical uses, setup, how to navigate the wizard, and then links to our documentation pages.